Uh, this way. Um, yeah, let's make it straight. Okay. Oh, hold on. Yeah. Okay. Hey. We like to show our necklaces. That's what we always do. Stop tripping. Okay. Okay. Hello, everyone. How you doing? Good day, night, noon, whenever you're getting this message. Welcome back. I should think of an intro. That is... Anyway, different intro, addition to. Hey, so we're sitting like this because we're going to talk about Santa Claus today. Yeah, we're going to talk about Santa Claus today. We've been talking about this over the past couple of years on Instagram. We tried to record the video. Well, we recorded a video and talked about this. Kind of in candid. And then we didn't put it out because, well, we just we want to listen to more than ourselves. And part of that is also, there's an important element to being candid about things, but I forgot to mention something when I told the Santa Claus story. But the other reason why I'm telling the Santa Claus story is because I've had this discussion with parents as well. It's wild. And so I'm going to start there. Just talk about like why it's important. It's already existing, Santa Claus, right? No, the way, well, that affects this, at least the first world countries that we live in that have a Santa Claus type holiday. And then how it's relative to like myself and these families. And then actually like, well, how it's relative to myself way, 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 way long ago. Way long ago. I learned about Santa when I was 4 years old. So we'll get there. Okay, so well, the first thing to bring up would be that Santa Claus is a part of a big story. A big story. I can't go into the whole thing. But what we've written on the wall, what we talked about on Instagram, is you probably heard this phrase, ho, 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 right? Well, if you add another syllable to that, Lee, like L-Y, then what do you get? Holy, holy, holy. Okay. Kind of wild, right? Because the Santa Claus that we know it, like red coat, reindeer, it's kind of like a double transposition of an original story. The original story is called The Visit, and the visit is, well, there's a visitor that comes down into the house of the father, and they're not red coated. They're small, they're green. And the reindeer, it's actually not like Rudolph style that you remember it. They're like war horses. Yeah, it's called The Visit. You can look it up. And then after that came, like the Christmas Story or whatever. And then Santa Claus. So already right there, just in literature, Santa Claus is just part of the story. And then so the visitor comes down and they make a conspiracy with the father of the house and says, to all a good Christmas. I think it's good. Yeah, to all a good Christmas. And leaves. Kind of wild. Right? But there's not just like a focus on Christmas. It's Santa Claus. It's Santa Claus. Okay, so then the conversation I've had with parents, I've asked this question, how will you, either as a single parent or two-parent household, whatever, how are you guys going to decide on how your children or your child finds out about Santa Claus? Some parents say, they'll just let them go through the same thing that they went through and they'll figure it out. And some parents say they'll tell them. Some parents say, well, I don't know. And this is an interesting point in the conversation because it might be too early to say what to do. So we'd ask the question. Usually we ask them, the question sounds something like, are you reappropriating your parental duties? If so, onto what or who or when? Fair question, right? Because one of the assumptions there is, let's just say what the parent experiences is relatively fine. It's not good, it's not bad. They're taking a chance that it'll happen the same way. And then if the parents tell them, well, how much time has gone by? Like, how do you decide when to tell them? What if your children, I don't know, they hold a grudge against you or something like that? I mean, that goes either way, right? If they find out later, if you tell them, it's like, how do you decide? And if you say you don't know, well, I don't know. Yeah, it's like, it's the worst. You haven't even thought about it. So if you ask me, oh, Christopher, if you had children, well, how would you decide? And I think I think one of the default things they get, how would you say, put under the rug is, especially from children, it's understandable. It's like you parents don't necessarily explain the type of lifestyle they're in. The type of lifestyle. Let's just say three categories of lifestyle. One is just, the type of loving parent lifestyle where they just want to be a family. And what Santa Claus can represent is a time for a family to be together. Or the second category where, a family wants to, how would you say, have their child develop as much as possible. And so maybe they might tell them, right? Yeah. And then another type of family where maybe they're more distant or too close. Right? Just let them figure it out, or they're just so close that it's not even a thing. And I think that's what gets overlooked. The parents don't necessarily talk about that. They just say, here's Santa. Do good, be good, because Santa knows. And that's not such a bad thing. But in a way, it's also an introduction to a higher ideal of behavior for children to align to based on how their parents present it. And, on the Daily Wire Plus, on one of Jordan Peterson's video series, Marriage, one of the things he says is, you want to get the children in on the responsibility game early. And that's kind of what that does. Santa Claus knows he has a list. Santa Claus knows he has a list. If you're doing good, if you're doing bad. Be responsible, be good. Right? Yeah. And then also, like we're saying, some families, some parents are kind of like, well, how do you decide? Do you say that child wasn't good enough because the parents didn't, let's say, make enough money or something happened and there wasn't the gift available, right? Or do they say Santa ran out of the particular thing? This is it's a tough subject, right? But what I did bring up in the previous videos, which is why we're recording it now, is we kind of just only talked about one of those lifestyles being the money thing, right? Depending on like a typical first world 9-to-5 type family. We didn't bring up all these other things. So as you can see, it's a tough decision. And sometimes maybe it's less tough for parents to say they'll figure it out or say they don't know. I can understand. And so I asked them, "Oh, how did you find out?" Right? And some had a great experience, some had a bad experience. But if you ask me, like if you ask me, like how would I picture the ideal, my child or children figuring out more about what Santa Claus is? Well, first let me predicate this, and we talk about this again on Instagram all the time. Feel free to follow us there on the private account. We'll up to a certain amount, we'll just let it be free. Otherwise, we're trying to charge for that because we're trying to figure out ways to be more sustainable while we create stuff. But one of the things we said about it on Instagram, this is years ago, and then a year ago, and then months ago, we bring it up every now and then, which is there's a type of unpacking where the children figure out it's their parents or whoever's the parent. And then one level up is kind of like, well, then who are my parents? And then one level up from that would be, well, who really are my parents? Like, what makes them parents? And then what makes them who they are? And then it's like, well, who's their parents? And then, so it goes way up, right? And that way up, we eventually go up high enough, it's undescribable, we'd say. But those are the most important things. As far as when the awareness is unpacked, right? Before that, the other side of the information bottleneck is how it permeates in a family or child's life, we'd say. All those other things. They're all very important. But that was the main thing as well. It's a very powerful question opens up, which is, who are my parents? Yeah, because I think in a way when individuals start to participate in questioning, even if they're younger, those are signals of individuality. They're not just like a blob of a baby or, something to love, even though they don't have words yet or they're so young, stuff like that. And there's so much to unpack there. Okay, so anyway, if you ask me, what would be the ideal? How would you let your children know what more about Santa Claus is? Or maybe my child or children might say something like this. So one Christmas season, when I was supposed to be sleeping, I woke up and I saw my dad, my father, dressing up like Santa Claus and getting gifts ready. And my mother was helping him. And then later on they told me that not everyone knows what you know now. And so we're going to ask you to be responsible. Because a lot of other children especially might not know. That might be a lot for a young soul. Now, why might that be a lot? Who knows? Maybe it might even be easy to discern, to not say something about that, to say something about that, when to, when not to, and to who, and who not to. Anyway. Now, if you ask me what really happened, my story, like I said in the beginning of the video, I found out about Santa Claus when I was 4 years old, between 4 and 5 years old, something like that. So 88 or 89, somewhere between those 2 years. And it happened in a place in Southern California. My parents couldn't really afford a daycare, so I was staying with a particular type of uncle. And that's also when I can recall my first experience with, a touch of malevolence. And so the experience that had me find out about Santa Claus went something like this. And that uncle's, at the time, I think they were like 10 or 11. So like 7 years older than myself. And I said something like, if you touch me again, I'm going to end you. This is 4-year-old. So his dad starts freaking out. This little 4-year-old trying to kill a dragon. And I have killed a dragon, by the way. The first dragon I killed. Now, it was in that same year. I can't remember if it's a little bit before or after that, but it was in a dream. Yeah, I killed a dragon. It was wild. There was like a like a, like monkey bar domes. You can climb on them and stuff. That was made out of like triangles. And there was a princess on there. And then she was telling me that a dragon's gonna come and help me out. So when I climb on the monkey bar things, put her behind me, and here comes this dragon. I said, we're on this monkey bar thing. And the dragon, relative to my size, would probably be like, if you take an airplane and put it, vertical, like a standard size airplane, it would be like that tall. And it goes, and it was trying to like roast us, right? So then I did something like this, and I was like, and I put a shield up right, and it's like, and I remember looking back at her like this. I remember looking back at her like this, and the fire's like roasting like this, right? And then fire stops, and the dragon's so frustrated he comes close to like, bite us. And then, as he gets close, somehow like a sword appeared, and I was like, once, and dragon's like, wow, and like, rolls over, dies, and it kind of disappears. And I turn around, and there was an expression of thanks and like, this. She was so thankful. She was so happy. We were so happy. And then she goes to give me a kiss like this. Yeah, like really close. And then somehow, what I think is I don't remember being kissed. Maybe I was. But then I was back in the room, and I was looking around. I was like, no, this is the bedroom. So like, I get the blanket, I put it over myself, and I'm closing my eyes, and I'm going like this. I'm trying to remake the dome in my head and fall asleep at the same time. I'm like, go to sleep. She's waiting, right? So that was the first dragon I killed, right? So back to the story. So the dad's freaking out, right? And I'm trying to kill this dragon. And then as his dad's pulling him away, though, I didn't know that much English, but I knew this much. And he yells, that uncle yells, he's like, Santa Claus is fake. Your parents have been lying to you. None of those gifts come from Santa Claus. It was wild. And from that moment on, I knew, well, let me get there. So anyway, I didn't know. I knew that I didn't know. That was the first thing. And so I was like, I remember thinking, we got to test this. Like, what kind of person would say that? Right? Lie to me. And if someone would say that, like, who else would say it or doesn't say it or knows this? So like, let's test this. So in the following Christmas season, my mother and my first dad, she's like, why is Christopher so pushy about wanting to see Santa? Like, he wasn't like this last year. Like, he really wants to go to the mall and see Santa. And my dad, it's funny because his nickname for me when we lived together with my first dad, was Sir. He's always just doing what he wants to do. So I call him Sir. So he's like, just take him to the mall. Fixing the focus. He's like, just take him to the mall. I'm like, okay. So we get to the mall, and then she's at, there's Santa, and all the kids are lined up, and she's asking me if I'm excited. All the other kids are excited, and whatever, all those questions, right? Yeah. And then, so I get in line, and she's watching, and my mother tells the story too, and she watches me go up, and she sees all the other kids go down, and then the next kid goes up, and they're super excited. The next kid goes up, they're like laughing, and then she sees me kind of walking up, and she's like, he's not excited like the other kids. And she tells the story like she's watching me on Santa's lap, and she says I look something like, let me fix the focus again. She says I was something like, sat down. And then I walk off, right? So she's like, how was it? And what did you ask for? All those questions and stuff. And I was like, well, let me ask you something. She's like, okay. It's like Santa knows when we're doing good and bad, right? Oh, of course he knows. That's why you get gifts when you're doing well. I was like, well, he knows what's good and bad because if I'm doing good and bad, because he knows who I am. She's like, of course, he has a list. Santa's list. He checks it twice. I was like, huh. So that means Santa knows my name. She's like, of course he knows your name. It would be on his list. I said, okay, so how come then when I sat on his lap, he said, what's your name, little boy? I don't think either of us remember what my mother said after that. So finishing up where we started. Time goes by and I watch how many kids, how many parents, teachers are participating in how this information and non-information is going back and forth. Which means at such a young age, the participation of qualifying and kind of attending from a different perspective and shifting that around was already there. And that it's been in practice for over 3.5 decades. It's like, oh, I see. That's what certain developed psychologies and personalities and souls do, right? Now you might ask, since that younger version of me figured it out, what happened? I never told anyone. Never. But from that moment on, I knew that version of me, I knew I could have, or could, if you're putting yourself in the young perspective, destroy a lot of lives. A lot. So we never told anyone. And the other thing is, I was talking about this with my buddy the other day. He's got one kid, and I help him around here, do the trash service. So we talk when I help him out. I told him the story. I told him the story because, well, anyway, he needed to hear it in parallel to something else he was going through. And I said, well, what I learned, besides all that, is that person, that uncle, learned that from somewhere. And then remanifested it when they were doing wrong to someone and someone stood up for themselves. We also learned that what they learned sucked. We also learned that what they learned sucked. And we're not going to do that. And then when I was telling my friend the story, it already is the case, but what we realized is that behavior is not autonomous in us. That we did not and do not continue doing what they did. So then going back to the parents, right? Let's say then, because we talked about it being ideal and what it would be like if it was pretty much good. What if it was worse? Worse than what I experience. God forbid. Then the question remains so that you can prevent that and maybe manifest more of what's good. And the question might be to the parents or single parent, whatever. Would it be better if you just took on the parental responsibilities on your own instead of passing it on? Yeah, so that's a story. And I don't remember how many other Christmas seasons come by. I'm just watching. I'm like, okay. Oh, you see the cards. That's from Santa. Oh, you know what? And this is something I'm remembering right now. I didn't mention in the other video because I think parents are really used to being in the parental role. But a great teacher once told other teachers that said this in a great way, which is sometimes there's, how do you say it? There's no better teachers for parents than their children. And I think parents are often used to being in the parental role, even if it's at a distance or really close. But what I'm realizing right now is that that younger version of me, that younger Christopher also couldn't decide when to tell their parents he knew. So maybe if you're, maybe children this age shouldn't be hearing this video. But if you're in a situation where it parallels that, where they think this and they think that, and they're kind of dancing around when to unpack something, I can recall what that younger version of me was thinking, and it was like, regardless of what's in this gift, it's probably something someone really wants. But look, it's wrapped, and it was thought about, and it was purchased, and then they put a little sticky on it, and they went through the trouble of hiding under the tree, and then went through the trouble of trying to make sure that their son is doing well, and that this is an acknowledgement of it. Sorry. So when the card says Santa, I didn't want to say I knew. Which is better that we were together. So days passed that, we all grow up. And then we tell this story. And then there was one time my mother and I are both telling this story. It's so much funnier when we're both telling it. So yeah. Have a good day.